Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I'm honored to have with me someone who is an incredibly gifted individual who has impacted the lives of thousands of individuals and will impact your life in a very positive manner. It's Pastor Kris Casey. He's a pastor at the Adams Square Baptist Church in Worcester, Massachusetts. He is an author. Title of the book, Inmate 31749. He is many things, and he has in the past year become a freedom fighter of the highest order. I think that if we probably would have talked to him about a year or two ago and said, Pastor Casey, you're going to be seen as a freedom fighter of the highest order, and he'd probably shake his head and go, well, no, I don't think so. But he has been, and he has gained significant recognition in him standing up for the Constitution, for freedoms, and in particular religious liberty. It's my honor to have with me Pastor Kris Casey. Pastor Casey, welcome to the Insider Insight Show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, Pastor Casey, let's start with your journey from the prison cell to the pulpit. Educate our listeners on how you ended up in a prison cell and how you ended up in the pulpit.
Yeah, I was a wild and out of control juvenile. I went to a private Catholic high school where I was searching for God. I just didn't know that I was searching for God. I asked a lot of provocative questions and was constantly told that I should shut up and sit down and not ask questions like that. And so that kind of deterred me from wanting to know more. So I had my daytime friends, but then I also had my nighttime friends, and my nighttime friends ended up getting in a lot of trouble with me and I with them. I ended up going to prison at the age of 19 years old. And one of my first cellmates said, why don't you come to church with me? And I was like, well, if there's anybody in the world that you want to get religious advice from, it might as well be an inmate, right? So I was very skeptical about this whole thing. But the Lord knew what he was doing and used this gentleman to bring me there. I went to church and I heard the gospel, I think, for the first time. And that was that Jesus loved me and that he died for me and then he forgave me of all my sins. And all I had to do was give my life to him. And I thought it can't be this simple. I was looking for this, back in high school, and I never found this. And so to finally get it, it really clicked and it made a lot of difference. And so my pastor started to mentor me and disciple me. And he told me two very important things. He said, number one, you haven't disqualified yourself from being used in the ministry. He says, really pray about what God would have you do the rest of your life. Well, at 20 years old now, I didn't know what God would have for me to do, but I began to pray. With nothing but time on your hands, you can have a lot of time to pray. And then he said, another great advice is this. He says, you need to pray for a wife. Well, I looked around and I was surrounded by a bunch of men, and clearly they weren't going to be my wife. So I had 2 years to pray for a wife as well. And so I ended up giving my life to the Lord in prison and telling him I lived my first 19 years doing evil and wicked. I'll give you the rest of my life, however long it'll be, I'll give you the rest of my life. Just provide for me the wife that you need me to have. I got out of Bible college. I got out of prison in July of 2003. 2 weeks after I got out of prison, I went to a Bible camp where there was other college and career age kids, and I saw my wife, my future wife. She was frolicking across the grass. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I found my wife. And she said, that's nice. What's her name? And I was like, I don't know. I haven't met her yet. And she's like, you're crazy. I said, no, this is the one. And she's like, okay. The next day I bumped into my wife, my future wife, Rachel. We started talking and we never stopped. We've been happily married. We just celebrated 15 years. Her dad was a pastor, and her dad, everything that her dad had told her to stay away from when she met me, her dad said, give this guy a chance. He's different, but he's on fire for the Lord. And so everything that her father preached about is the same thing. He said, you can go give this guy a shot. He's a good man. And so I was thankful for that, that God not only gave me a second chance at life with salvation, but he gave me a second chance at finding the best woman that I could ever have. So we dated for about 2 years, and I went to Bible college, graduated in 4. I went back and worked with my father-in-law. He was a pastor. I worked with him for 7 years. fitting because my wife's name is Rachel, and so I had to work for Rachel for 7 years. I'm thankful that I didn't get Leah, which is her sister. That would have been very confusing. And so shortly after working him for 7 years, the Lord opened the door for me to come to Worcester, Massachusetts. And now I've been pastoring for 8 years here in the inner city.
Kris, you are very open about your past, as you already have been today. In your book, Inmate 31749, I imagine it has touched the lives of many thousands of young people, because in the book you point out where you went, if you will, wrong, or what got you in prison. We have a number of folks that watch our videos and our presentations that are young, and we have a large number of people who are parents that worry about their children, obviously, getting into trouble. What do you tell the members of your parish that are young, that you see headed in a wrong direction? What words of advice do you give them, and what words of advice do you give to parents who might see their children going in a direction that they're not happy with?
Yeah, with the whole, I've experienced a lot of greatness with the whole lockdown, and that is this, that oftentimes kids and parents have been too busy to be a family. They've gone to this practice, they've gone to this meeting, they've gone to this, they've gone to that. And it's equalized everything. And so the advice that I give people is what you find in Psalm 1. And that is, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. And so how are you going to teach the kids not to walk in the counsel of the ungodly if you as a parent are walking in the counsel of the ungodly? And so really the epidemic that we have in America, in a sense, and around the world, is the fact that parents are no longer rearing up their children to follow and love God with all of their heart, with all of their soul, with all of their mind. And because of that, you have a falling away of the juveniles in America because their parents don't love God with all their heart. Oftentimes I see that there's a casual Christianity or a complacent Christianity where people aren't all in for Jesus. And so really it boils down to the basic fact that parents need to do a better job rearing their children. But also on the flip side, we've got to make things obtainable for children to understand and kids to understand and bring the gospel down to their level. And I'm thankful that Jesus was a master in that. He could talk to anybody. And in fact, when the disciples said, don't let the children come to me, Jesus said, suffer these little children to come unto me, and said, bring them, let me instruct them, let me teach them. And so really our goal should be to go after our children and teach them the ways of the Lord, and show them how to make right decisions and help them make right decisions so they don't make bad decisions like I ended up making going to prison.
When you were in prison, your first night, what was it like?
I was locked in a cell, a single cell by myself for the first night, and it was a unique experience. At that moment, I had no idea what my future was in front of me. I just knew that I had 2 years to go, and so it began to be one day at a time, one moment at a time. I'm thankful that because of the state that I committed a crime in, New Hampshire is one of the least violent prisons in America, and I'm thankful for that. But that doesn't negate the fact that it was still an extremely tough time. So I began one moment at a time, just trying to find myself, what happened, where did I go wrong, and then obviously that led me into the church and led me to where God wanted me to be.
Worst day in prison.
When my grandmother died and I wasn't able to get out and go to the funeral. I think that was tough. There's some other tough times, and that was, before I went to prison, I was a state championship football player, MVP, had a lot of fun, fast money, fast cars, fast girls, fast alcohol, fast drugs. And all of my friends the night before said, hey, we're going to come visit you. We're going to write you. We're going to call. And, 3-6 months in, there was nobody there. Mm-hmm. And so the Lord, I was popular in high school, and within 6 months, he stripped the care of being popular. I no longer counted the days. I began to count the Friday nights because I knew my friends were going to be having fun and I wasn't there having fun. And so when the Lord strips something from you, like your care of being popular, he always fills it with something else, and that was his presence. And so he took something that as a young person we all strive for, and he gave me something different, and that was his presence, that he was never going to leave me nor forsake me. And that began the journey of walking with him and talking with him on a more faithful and regular basis. And still today, I'm thankful for that presence, because there's been I stood up against the governor, and there was a lot of my friends, pastor friends, who turned their back on me, who called me and said, this is not the way God would have it. And I said, well, I respect you, but I disagree. This is what the Lord put on my heart. And by the way, you're welcome, because churches are open because I took a stand. So, have a nice day. And I say that humbly, but, when you're out front doing something that nobody else is doing, you have friendly fire, and then you have enemy fire. But if you're in the presence of God, no harm is going to, come to you. No weapon formed against you shall prosper.
An important person in your life was Pastor Hoyt.
Yes.
Educate our listeners on Pastor Hoyt and his impact in your life.
Yeah, Pastor Hoyt is a great man. I love him very, very dearly. He had a thriving ministry out west, a thriving kid ministry working for his pastor. And he went to his pastor one day and he said, "Pastor, I feel like God's calling me away. He's calling me to New Hampshire, to this really small town in New Hampshire." And his pastor looked at him and said, "You got to be crazy. You have this ministry. You don't need to leave." And then he came back to his pastor a couple of days later, and he said, "Pastor, I really feel like I need to leave." And his pastor again said, "Don't leave. You have so much going on here." And he came back a third time and he was crying. And he said, "Pastor, God is telling me I have to leave. I have to go to this town. I have to start a church here." And so his pastor said, "Okay, if God's telling you that desperately and that, forcefully, you got to go." So he moved his family across the country and went to this small little town up in Berlin, New Hampshire. About a year after he got there, the New Hampshire State Prison opened. And what did he do? He became the chaplain in the prison. And shortly after the prison opened, I went to this brand new prison, and that's where I met Pastor Hoyt. And that's when he showed me the gospel for the first time and led me to Jesus. And upon doing that, it was something that I longed for. It's something that my soul was thirsty for. And so I'm very grateful for the 2 years that he spent, 3 or 4 times a week, discipling me, training me, helping me listen to sermons, getting me involved in the things as best as he could to begin my walk with the Lord. And then I'm thankful because instead of, when I got released, instead of just letting me go back into the world, he called up a church in my town and said, "Hey, you need to go get this guy." And so this church didn't know who I was, but yet they came and they picked up this convict and brought him to church. And, they had all eyes on me, but, I was thankful because that's what I was looking for. And then 2 weeks later, I ended up, meeting my wife. And so the Lord really has used him in a mighty way. And I'm thankful because right now, sitting on the governor's desk in the state of New Hampshire is my pardon request, my pardon application. And I'm waiting to hear back. We were supposed to hear back in February, March, but because of everything with COVID, it put everything to a standstill. When Pastor Hoyt made this comment, he said, "I have seen thousands of inmates come through in the last 20 years, and there's not one that I would write a pardon request for besides Kris Casey." And that was humbling words. That you've seen 1,000 people, thousands of people, and there's only one that you're willing to write a request for. And so I was humbled by that and gracious for that, because he had a very, very big impact in my life.
If Pastor Hoyt hadn't come into your life, if the other inmate hadn't suggested that you go to a service, where do you think you would have ended up, Kris?
I probably ended up right back in the world, a whole lot smarter and committing the same amount of crimes, just not getting caught. That's our sinful nature. It's often a cliche that people go to prison to get smarter and to get refined, because they learn how other people got caught, and they learn new schemes, and they learn new tactics, and then they go out and try it. And sometimes they get caught. Most of the time they don't, because they've perfected their craft. And so I'm thankful that God broke that in my life I could have got a slap on the wrist. I could have got, I could have got probation. But the Lord saw fit to allow me to go to prison for 2 years. And I find great comfort in Joseph. Joseph went to prison for 2 years. He was innocent, but he went to prison for 2 years. So I kind of found, and then I looked at his life and I said, he went to prison, but yet God was with him, and his hand was upon him, and God did great things. And so if God could do that for Joseph, who was innocent, what could God do for me, who was guilty? And so I'm thankful that Pastor Hoyt was there.
Kris, when you look about what's happening in our country right now, Seattle, Chicago, Portland, you see Antifa, you see the organizers, if you will, the founders of Black Lives Matter, who have declared themselves as being Marxist terrorists. You see the death and destruction and the rioting and the looting. Kris, what's the best way to deal with folks that are in those organizations from your perspective?
So listen, I pastor an inner city church. I'm thankful for that. I don't look at people by the color of their skin. I try to always remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s phrase, I want my kids to grow up in a world where they're judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And that's how I look at people, because realistically, we came from Adam and Eve, and therefore we have the same Adamic race. We come from God. And so I don't look at people in a negative way. I try to look at everybody that God has a plan for them and God wants to redeem them. Right now in my church, I've been called a racist because I have preached on the Marxist and socialistic and communist and terroristic ideas of Black Lives Matter organization. Because what they want to do is overthrow what somebody was born with. And that's if they were born a man, no, you can be a woman. They want to push the whole homosexual agenda. Their literal makeup says they want to break up the Western nuclear family. And back in June 19th, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter came out and said her whole goal was to bring Marxism into America and overthrow Donald Trump because he's a wicked man. What's the problem with that is that everybody matters to God. And the Bible says, for whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And so whosoever means everybody. But we have a great problem in America where it used to be many years ago, people had forgotten God. And now we're coming to a place in America where people don't even know God. People think that Easter Sunday is about, an Easter bunny. People think that Christmas is about Santa Claus. And what's wrong with that? People have lost the understanding of who Jesus Christ is and why he was born and what he came into the world for. And so when we remove God from schools and prayer in 1962, and then a couple years later we started putting police in the schools, now there's a movement to defund the police. Well, it only took 50, 60 years to have this happen. You're seeing 2 or 3 generations in that time be removed from God and be removed from the authority that's over them. I have people tell me all the time when they were a little kid, if they did wrong in school, their mom and dad would find out and they'd get disciplined at school and they'd get disciplined when they got home.
Yeah, guilty.
And now it's reversed. Right. Now it's you did something wrong. It was the teacher's fault, and little Johnny or Susie is okay. And so you really have an upending of the authority in America. And so when you have people who don't care about where we came from, and they don't care about the foundation in which America was created, and that was that we would have the liberty to have differences, the liberty to have the freedom of discussion. I was labeled a racist because I stood up for the cause of Jesus Christ, and I basically said, look, you either choose the Bible and Jesus, or you're choosing a socialistic organization over God. It's your choice. But that's part of their playbook. Because you don't agree with them, they're told to label you as something. And that's the frustrating thing, is that you can't have dialogue with someone who wants to kill you. You can't have dialogue with someone who literally wants to overthrow everything that you are. And so again, it goes back to the parents. The Bible says if we spare the rod, we destroy the child. And we've seen a whole generation or 2-3 generations of parents who haven't disciplined their kids. Their kids have a meltdown in the store because they don't get a candy bar. Back when I was a kid, if I got a meltdown in the store because I didn't get a candy bar, I'd get a whooping when I got home. But now it's a completely different thing. There's a meltdown. Oh, it's okay. And if there's no change in action, and therefore they grow up thinking that this is okay. And so it shouldn't be surprising that there's turmoil in America for the lack that people are don't understand who Jesus is and what he has done for us.
Kris, educate our listeners and viewers on your parish before the coronavirus hit, COVID-19. How many people were in your parish, the consistency, the demographics, how your parish was networked in the community.
Sure, we had a very diverse network, and it was amazing. We had between 75 and 125 that would regularly attend. Most of them would be transported in via public transportation or our bus ministry, and then a good 40% of them would come their own way. And so you have it's very diverse. People from all over the world. Any given Sunday, you can see me and my wife and our leadership team in the church walk around with Google Translate, trying to talk to people and getting to know who they are and what they're all about. And so I'm thankful for that. We were thriving. We were doing good. We had a revival in 2017, and that was carried us over. Our church, doubled, almost tripled in that time. Wow. And so God is really blessing and doing a great thing. That was right before COVID hit. When during the COVID thing, we were watching and trying to make the best assessment of what was going on. We tried drive-in, and that didn't work. We started to segregate our people because, people weren't taking public transportation. So you literally saw the church go from 100 to, 25, 30, and that was really frustrating. And I said, I've been out to these big box retailers and I've seen these stores, and they're not practicing social distancing. No. They're not being clean. They're not doing all these things. And I said, you know what? Not only can I be social distance, not only can I be safe, but I can be sanitized. I can do it better than they are. Because I watched them and I said, we can do this. And if they're open, why can't a church be open? Mm-hmm. And so I politely wrote a letter to the governor, to the city manager, to the mayor, to the chief of police, and said, I'm having church, and here's why. And that was they got the letter on a Friday, certified mail. All three received it on a Friday. Saturday, nothing. Sunday, we had church, and it was a great, great church. We had about 75 people in church. It was absolutely amazing. Monday,
and you took all the precautions, like you said.
All the precautions.
Right? Temperature checks, the whole shooting match.
Everybody had face masks. Everybody had temperature checks. For the first couple of weeks, they were telling us it could spread on contact. So, my wife and I and everybody that came to church was wearing gloves. And so we went above and beyond what anybody else was doing so that we could have church. We looked foolish, but we were worshiping God because I was making a stand. The following Monday, I got a letter from the chief of police. Stopped by my house and he said, I just want to give you the governor's order. And I said, I've already read the governor's order. I just want you to know what I'm going to do, Chief. I'm going to have church on Wednesday. I'm going to have church on Sunday. I'm going to have church on Wednesday and have church on Sunday. I'm going to keep going. And he just shook his head and walked away. So we had church on Wednesday. The police showed up. They were outside. They were counting people to go in. Sunday, we only had 10 on Wednesday because I think people are still trying to figure out what was going on.
Right.
And then on Sunday, we ended up having the following Sunday, we had church, and we had 75, 85 people in church. And the chief was outside. He brought the mounted police. He brought 6 cop cars up the street, 6 cop cars down the street, and then 4 undercover cop cars, and then multiple officers all around the church counting the people as they walked in the building. I thought, wow, this is a very honorable thing to send the mounted police to church on Sunday for the Lord. This is amazing. I don't know if any church service has ever had this before. So I was thankful that he did that.
Yeah, right.
But there was a woman who came, and she came from Lexington, which is about an hour from where we are. Uh-huh. And she said, I'm coming to your church with my family because you're the only pastor in the state that's willing to take a stand against tyranny. And I want you to know something. When this is all over, you're going to have a completely different church. And, when you're fighting the battle every day against the government, sometimes things slip your mind and you don't really pay attention to them. But when you're a month or two after, you start to look back and you're like, you know what? I do have a completely different church. God is, in a sense, has whittled away some of the people who really didn't have a walk with the Lord and didn't really want to do anything for the Lord. But God has brought in an army of believers who are excited to see what's going on and want someone who's willing to stand up and fight the injustices in this world in a biblical way. My goal is not to, to be mean to anybody or hurt anybody, but my goal is to present the love of Jesus Christ, and teach people the gospel. And the scripture tells us that people are dying for the lack of knowledge. They don't have it. They don't understand it. And because of that, they perish in their ignorance. They perish because they don't understand the truth of the Bible. And so having this great opportunity to stand up and, as you said a little bit early in the interview, to be a freedom fighter, like you said, back in February, I was literally in Florida at a beach house and having the time of my life with my family, and they started shutting down, states. And I just told my wife, I'm like, they're going to shut down Massachusetts. Why don't we just stay here in Zoom meeting from the beach house? We can have a great time. And if they're going to shut the church down, let them shut it down. I'll have a good time. Of course, that was in the flesh. The spirit, my wife had a good spirit. She said, if they're going to shut your city down, you should be there. And here's the truth. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in Florida, enjoying the sunshine and not have to snow blow the sidewalks anymore. But I made the decision, my wife said, well, I'm not going to tell you what you do. Just think about it. Pray about it tonight. Well, whenever the wife says pray about it, the next morning you're going to wake up convicted and you got to make a change. And so I woke up and I said, all right, we're on our way home. And so this was a Friday. It's a Thursday. We left Florida, and we made it. We stopped in D.C. And I said, if we can make it home in good time, I'll be happy. It typically takes anywhere from 8 to 10 hours to get from Washington, D.C. to Worcester. We made it home in 5.5 hours.
Wow.
There was no traffic on the road, and I felt like Moses in the Red Sea. God's like, I want you to go home. You're going to do something great. At the time, I didn't know what God was going to do, but he wanted me to do something. And so we made that trip home, and God literally flipped the church upside down in these last 90 days. And it's been a truly amazing sight, humbling sight to watch what God has done.
The city actually filed a complaint against you, didn't they? They threatened you?
Say that again.
The city actually filed a complaint against you, didn't they? Or they threatened you? We might send you to jail. Educate our. What was your response, Pastor Kris, to that?
Yeah, I thought that was quite hilarious because clearly they didn't do their research. The first time they sent me a fine, I looked at it and I said, I can't believe I'm getting fined for having church. What is America coming to? And then the next time we had church, I was waiting all day for the chief to show up and give me the fine like he did the first time.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And so I waited, and then I watched the city meeting that night. And the city manager came out and said, we were in court all day trying to figure out what we were going to charge Pastor Casey with. And the moment he said we had to figure out what we were going to charge him with, God said, you're going to win. And so they said we filed a criminal complaint against him, which carries up to a year in jail and a $500 fine. And so that was a Thursday. Friday, I still haven't got credit for what I'm about to tell you to do, what I did. But Friday, I sent $500 of subs to the police department from Pastor Casey in Adams Square Baptist Church to the chief of police. I still haven't gotten a thank you for that, but they did enjoy the subs.
And so when they threatened you about going to jail, your response was what?
Yeah, when they threatened me going to jail, I did a news interview and they asked me the same question. And I said, well, clearly they haven't done their research because I spent 2 years in prison and that's where I got saved. And you could have just seen the news reporters' chins just dropping. I said, so what are they going to do? They're going to arrest me and put me in jail for the weekend? Praise God. Now I can have a prison ministry. And so, it's prison doesn't, once you've conquered something, once you've defeated it, it no longer scares you. So what are you going to threaten me with? Jail? I've already been there. I'm a winner. We're going to win. So you're not going to defeat God.
Pastor Kris, so where does this stand now? Where is your situation right now?
So back in May, the city decided to drop all charges. We filed a federal lawsuit on a Wednesday at 5 p.m. By Monday morning, the governor came out and said churches, in a sense, were essential. And they literally took our cleanliness playbook that we had put in the media that told them what we were doing, and they made that a staple for all of Massachusetts.
Of course, you got credit for that, right?
No, I didn't get it. No, I didn't get any credit for that either.
Yeah, that's how they work.
And then Tuesday, the governor of Rhode Island followed suit with the governor of Massachusetts and opened up churches all across Rhode Island. And so the amazing thing is that those two states, these two states are now allowed, not allowed, but now have the option to have church, not have their religious rights trampled upon.
When you opened your church, have you had, of your parishioners, have any of them contracted COVID?
No.
Now, we see what's happening in California. Similar situation right now that was happening in New Hampshire. They're threatening a number of pastors right now for even speaking about opening their churches. Have you had any communication with them? Because it appears what you did has been effective.
Yeah. I saw John MacArthur come out a couple of days ago on Sunday and put out his speech that a couple months ago he was very cautious because we didn't know anything about COVID, but now it seems like we know more about it, and they're just trying to inflict damage against our First Amendment right. And so he came out and said, we're going to have church. And I posted online. And I said, welcome to the club. It's good to finally have you having church again. We've never talked, we've never met, but I stood up first and foremost because that's what God told me to do. That's what he wanted me to do. I had no idea the ramifications that were going to happen. I had no idea the ripple effect that was going to happen. My good friends down in New Jersey had a federal court case yesterday because they followed suit. They opened church and defied the governor's order. In the state of New Jersey, it's a class 4 felony, facing a $1,000 fine every time you do it and jail time for having church. And so, this is a scary time in America where people are being fined to go to church, but they can go to the abortion clinic, they can go to the liquor store, they can go to the pot shop, they can fix their home from Home Depot, they can go shopping at Walmart, but you can't go to church. And so this is a scary time. So we're at a point in American history, 400 years after it was discovered in 1620. We're at a point in America where we're either going to see ourselves implode in total ruin, or maybe God will give us one more chance and we'll see a great spiritual revival sweep across this nation, and people will turn to God for the first time, and people will turn back to God for being casual and complacent with their walk with the Lord.
Pastor Kris, many people that are watching our interview right now are not allowed to worship. They're not allowed to go to their church. How should they approach their pastor? What should they say to their pastor? Because many of our viewers, our listeners, are frustrated. They feel as though their pastors are just sitting on the bench on this one.
Yeah, and that's a very, very tough thing because, like I said in the earlier part of this interview, we have people coming from all over Massachusetts, an hour and a half to come to church because we were the only one willing to take a stand. And we had people come and say, why will my pastor not stand up? Why will he not take a stand for the Lord? Don't they know that this is going towards the end times? We need a leader. We don't need a follower. And so I would tell the listeners and the viewers that number one, they need to pray. Pray that their pastor, if he doesn't have a backbone, would get a backbone and would actually stand up and do the right thing. It's our First Amendment right. And here's the problem: if pastors continue to do this time we had a lot of persecution. Next time they know the pastors didn't stand and they folded, and the next time it's only going to get worse. And so, we should have all of a sudden we should have one big day where we all stand up and everybody opens their doors and says, you know what, I don't care about the consequences. We're just going to have church and we're going to come back and do what God wants us to do. So number one, pray. But number two, go talk to your pastor. If enough people go to the pastor and say we need to have church, he should, if he's got a backbone, he's going to be convicted about it and do it. Now, I understand that, different pastors are in different locations and they have different reasons for why they're doing something and why they're not doing something. But people are looking for a leader. I'm baptizing about 6 or 8 people this Sunday. I just had an opportunity to lead 2 more people to the Lord yesterday. And they said the only reason we came is because you opened the doors when nobody else did. And we were looking for a man who was going to be a leader. And so there's people out there who are looking for a pastor to be a leader, to lead with authority, to lead with kindness, but to lead with passion, and who's not going to be a sissy, who's not going to back down, who's willing to lay his life down for the sheep, just like Jesus did.
Pastor Kris, how can folks follow you? How can they follow your efforts? Do you have an online service that they can tune into? What's the best way for them to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, they can go to our website. It's adamsquarebaptist.com, adamsquarebaptist.com, and check out our website. We update it every service. It's updated, and we have a constant. Sometimes there's blogs on there, missionary updates, but that's how people stay in touch with us. Or they can visit us on YouTube and watch our live stream services.
And what channel is it? Adam Square Baptist channel on YouTube?
I'm sorry, it froze again.
Is your YouTube channel Adam Square Baptist? Is your
YouTube channel is Adam Square? Yeah, our YouTube channel is Adam Square Baptist Church.
Pastor Kris Casey, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. You're an incredibly gifted, not only pastor, not only author, not only man, father, husband, but an incredibly freedom fighter, and I thank you for your perseverance and your sacrifice.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I hope you have a blessed day.
And same to you, Pastor Kris. And I'd like to thank you folks for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Dare to fail. Dare to fail. Dare to fail. Dare to fail.